a big mistake we make as business owners is like, hey, I need to replace myself. So I'm going to find someone who does everything that I do, and you can't afford them. You literally cannot afford them, at least someone of quality. So you end up hiring someone worse than you, worse than the quality you want, and your businesses suffer.
This episode is brought to you by Big Storage Ventures. We are now inviting you to team up and partner alongside us. We bring our experience hunting storage deals and maximizing the self-storage asset to provide our partners with cash flow, tax benefits, and appreciation, all in one recession-resistant asset. Leverage our sister company, Big Ben's Moving Service, to fill your facility and give you an edge over the competition. Reach out to bigstorageventures@gmail.com or DM Big Storage Ventures on Instagram to team up. Welcome back to the Beyond Net Worth podcast. Thanks for coming on today, Jake. How you doing, man?
Doing super well. I'm really excited to chat with both of you guys. It's something I've been looking forward to for a while.
I know. Before we got going, we were diving in. We're like, okay, we better start this thing off. We're getting into it. But I'm excited really because I think your core competencies as a business coach really apply to anyone that's starting a business or scaling a business. But back up for us just a little bit. I mean, tell us what got you, from where you started to being a business coach, and what made you so passionate about entrepreneurship.
Yeah, great question. Wow, that was a lot of questions, actually. I'm trying to think of the best way to answer all of those at once. Yeah. So what got me into entrepreneurship? What got me into business? In my freshman year of college is really when that started. And this it's been a minute. It's been a few years, but I was in college, and at the time, I think like most freshmen in college, I wanted to make the world a better place. I wanted to do good in the world. I wanted to leave my mark. And in my mind, the only way to do that was join the Coast Guard or the Peace Corps or become a firefighter, right? These are the ways that you do good in the world. Yeah. And I read a book that followed a bunch of executives that were also religious individuals. And it really opened my eyes to the fact that, wait a second, business is a way to do good in the world. And there's this quote by Clayton Christensen, the Harvard business professor. And I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially he said that one of the most impactful positions in life is that of a manager, of a business owner, of a boss, because you're working intimately with people and they're looking to you as an example, not just for professionally, but because of your position, they're also going to be looking at you in other areas of your life.
Yeah. And
hopefully you're able to look at them and interact with them in those different areas of their lives. And so you get to deeply impact people as a manager, as a boss, as a business owner in a way that very few people do. I mean, most of us are going to spend more time with our manager or communicating with our manager than we will our own family, depending on, what we do during the day to day, but right. We spend more time in their presence. And that's a big impact. That's a really big impact. So that's what really got me interested in, wait, if I want to do good, maybe business is a way that I can do good in this world.
Yeah, that's I've read The Innovator's Dilemma and How Will You Measure Your Life. That quote sounds really familiar. I'm not sure which book that was in, but for our audience, what was the book?
Yeah, that was How Will You Measure Your Life.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Alan's a big Christensen fan, huh?
Yeah, I am. It was really powerful. I had that similar experience reading that because, when you want to make an impact in the world, you think of, I thought the same way. There's certain things you do, but never, he boldly claimed that business is by far one of the greatest opportunities to have an impact in someone's life. As a manager, he said a manager, because you're right. So much, and you're so involved with those families and their lives. It's pretty incredible.
Well, you rub off on people, right? So in just my moving company, I'm already we have a couple managers, and sometimes we say, hey, time to have the dad talk with this new guy, right? Like, we're bringing them in, and these guys come from all walks of life. We'll give anyone a chance to come in and be a part of our team, and really no one does have a bigger impact on them. And we'd all like to think that we're all tough guys, but I think these guys rub off on each other, especially when they're a good influence, so that's a big deal.
That's awesome. So you knew you wanted to get into business. Where did that take you next? Because we know you're a great business coach now. Was there a stepping stone to that?
Yeah, there's about 30 of them. There was quite a few. It was hard for me because I remember growing up. I have my best friend from high school. His name's Adam. He knew exactly what he was going to do from, like, I don't know, sophomore year of high school or something like that. And he's still on that plan 20 years later, just like super focused, knew exactly what he wanted. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And I took so many different turns, took so many steps into the darkness to kind of test out the water, throw spaghetti at the wall and see what stuck. It was a really interesting experience. So I spent 10 years. I knew I wanted to work in small businesses. So I spent 10 years working in small businesses in every department you can possibly imagine.
Wow.
I worked in customer service, in sales, in product development, supply chain, finance, HR, like everything. And just trying to find what my niche was. Like, where am I going to have the most impact? Where am I going to have the most fun in my life? And after going through this, this management circuit that I put myself through for 10 or so years, I ended up at a company where my skills just aligned perfectly with what they needed. And I grew rapidly through the company into an executive position in a multi-million-dollar company. They're, all over the US at the time. And it was just such a learning experience for me. It was so eye-opening. But I worked with a lot of business owners in this position, and I saw some things that were pretty scary to me. So I'm a family man. I'm married. I've got 5 kids.
Congrats.
Just incredibly close together.
What are their ages? Just curious.
Yeah, so we have a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old and a 3-month-old.
No way.
Yep.
Round of applause. That's awesome.
One after another.
I'm telling my wife we got to get on that plan. I just had my first baby, and dude, I'm already begging for another one. But obviously, she's still traumatized from the birth. But
yeah,
I applaud you. That's amazing, man.
That's insane. That's says a lot about your wife. I mean, she must be a superstar.
Yeah,
she really is. I am so lucky to have her in my life for so many different reasons, and her power and her ability to love and mother is unparalleled. I am just so grateful for her.
I'm connecting my wife Lauren with your wife after the show.
Yeah, please do. My wife was actually the one who was typically the instigator of these conversations, right? So I remember when we brought our second kid home from the hospital, right?
Yeah.
We've had our first kid. 14 months later, we got our second kid. And while we're in the hospital still, my wife is like, hey, I think we should have another one. And I was like, yeah, I'm holding him. We just had one. Like, this is it. And she's like, no, like another one. And I was like, are you kidding me? I feel like if I had brought it up at that moment, I would have gotten slapped. Like, that's just way too fresh. But she brought it up, and she's got so much faith and so much, just a really strong desire to do what's right by our family and to do what's right by God. And I'm really grateful for her for that.
Wow. I'm sorry to take a tangent, but I just had to applaud that. That's amazing to me.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So good job, Mrs.
Yeah, no. I'm glad you did. It's a big part of my life.
Cool.
And when people ask me, like, tell me about yourself, that's the first thing I think of.
Yeah.
Because that's where I get the most joy and where I want to spend the most time. And I think in the business world, especially, we have a tendency to define ourselves by our roles in the business world.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a business owner, I'm a team leader, I'm a manager, I'm a sales rep, whatever your title is. And that has in reality very little to do with who you are. You know, if you lost your job today, are you going to be a different person tomorrow? Hopefully not. I imagine not.
Right.
Most of us are going to be the same person. So it's not our role that defines us. And so I try to take a much more holistic approach when I think about who I am as an individual.
I love that, and that's great advice for everyone. So, going back, so you became the executive of this
Yeah.
company. Everything aligned. You had 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, and
Yeah.
he was seeing red flags from other business owners. That's where we got
Okay,
off.
yeah,
right.
okay, that's okay.
That's where
go
we
back
got
to
off.
there.
Yeah. So I remember I had this conversation with this business owner, and I'll never forget this. This is just a super good man and the most positive person I'd ever met. Like just all smiles all the time. And one day him and I are chatting and he starts crying. And again, I've never seen this emotion in him before. I'm a little bit caught off guard, but we start talking through it and I was like, well, what's going on? He says his company was just absolutely crushing it. He was doing way better than anybody else in our circle 2 times over. He was just doing really, really well. But he's like, I just haven't really seen my wife this last year.
Oh my gosh.
And he's just really heartbroken about this because I know how much he loves his wife. I know her and I know she loves him as well. And they're a great couple. And he was just so heartbroken by that. And then I said, all right, man, let's do something about it. Let's make a game plan. Let's figure out how you can keep growing your business and still see your family. And his response was really short. He said, no, that's not possible. I want to be successful in the business world, and this is just a sacrifice that I have to make.
Jeez.
And then he left. And that was the end of our conversation. And it tore my heart apart. I just was so crushed by that idea that you have to be successful. In order to be successful, you have to sacrifice your family. And it's a common anthem out there. You hear a lot of people preaching that.
Yeah.
You know, one of the gentlemen from Shark Tank has this great depressing quote where he says, if you want to be successful, there's no Saturday soccer games, there's no Sunday dinner with your family.
Jeez. Which shark?
That was O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful.
Oh,
Kevin O'Leary.
dude. Not the kind of millionaire we want to aspire to be.
No,
Sorry,
it just
Mr.
like,
Wonderworld, that's not wonderful at all.
yeah, that just broke my heart. And he's since pushed out some different messages, and I think he's starting to see life a little bit differently. I've never met him, obviously, but
Yeah.
that message, like that YouTube video, someone sent me that YouTube video, and it hurt. It hurt to see. And so I started, trying to figure out, okay, I know that this is possible from some previous experiences. I want to figure out how it's possible.
Oh yeah.
So I just started interviewing everybody. Some of them are on my podcast, Tenaciously Human. I've interviewed a bunch of people on there. I've interviewed a lot more people off of there. And I got to figure out how to be successful and still have a family, still have my faith, and not lose the things that are most important to me while being just ridiculously successful in the professional world.
Yeah. Big realization to have. Honestly, I mean, I think what you said stuck out to me about how some people wear their busyness as a badge of honor. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, that is bullcrap. Like you do not need to, you need to be doing the high priority things and delegating the rest and prioritizing family, relationships, all that stuff first, right? Because you can be a very miserable millionaire and look back with regret. And that's like with your podcast, Tenaciously Human, and ours, it's literally what beyond net worth means, is like your net worth isn't as important as who you are, and that goes beyond that. So
yeah,
that's awesome, man.
We have a tendency as humans to feel like money's going to solve all our problems. But, when you talk to a millionaire who can buy his kid a house, but can't take them to dinner, like that is just devastating, right? The kid doesn't even want to talk to his dad. He's so wealthy, he can buy him whatever he wants, but there's no relationship there, right? That isn't the life that I want to lead. And I learned that super early in my career, these 2 summers back to back, working for 2 different individuals that really just gave me a really big understanding of what it looks like to be wealthy and how to do it.
Right.
So I've had this belief for a long time.
Okay. So go into that a little bit more. So there's 2 millionaires
Yeah.
that you looked
that's right.
at over the summer, and what was the big contrast that you saw?
Yeah. Great question. So I've got these two summers back to back. So the summer before my freshman year of college and the summer after. And both summers I worked for multimillionaires. The first summer I worked for a contractor. The second summer I worked for an architect. Now, their situations from the outside looked almost identical, right? They're incredibly successful. Both of them have massive houses. In both situations, I'm actually helping them build their second house, either on or very near their property of their first house. And just incredibly wealthy people, nice cars, nice house, the works. From the outside, it looks like they both are living the American dream.
Right.
As I got to know their families, again, I'm working on their personal properties. So I got to know these families really intimately. And a couple things started standing out to me from the contractor that first year. So one of those things is he came up to me and he's like, "Hey, you never guess what I got my wife for her birthday." And I was like, "I don't know. What'd you get her? Like a car?" I don't know what wealthy people buy each other. And he's like, "You'll never guess." And I was like, "Okay." And so I started throwing some stuff out and he's like, "It costs $50,000. And then he started walking away. And I was like, "Well, you didn't tell me what it was." And he's like,
Genius.
that wasn't even the point to him. The point was how much money he spent. That was what made it a great gift. And he ended up getting her a wine cellar and just loading it with just so much alcohol. And that was a great gift for her. I'm sure she loved it. Doesn't really seem worth it to me, but I'm not a drinker, so you have to ask somebody else.
That reminds me of the white elephant gift exchange on The Office when Michael's like, "I got Ryan an iPod," and Phyllis gave him the mittens.
Yeah.
He's like, "Christmas is about I love you this many dollars worth."
Exactly. Yeah. Spot on.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
So that's a bad example.
I gotta watch that episode.
Yeah, and then another time during that summer, this is towards the end. I remember I walked into their house. Pretty rare. I didn't actually go inside their house very often, their first house, but it looked like a museum. I mean, I looked like it was just straight out of, like the Met or something like that. Really high end, marble floors, tall ceilings, fine art everywhere. And in the middle of their foyer, they had this immaculate vase, just gorgeous vase. I'm sure it cost more than my car and probably more than my house. I mean, it was just a super nice vase. And you could tell it was special to them. And as I'm talking to them, I start to hear the pitter patter of little feet. Now, I had younger siblings at the time, and so I knew what that meant. But I start looking at this kid who rounds the corner, and then I look at the vase. I look at the kid, he's getting closer, and then I look at the vase, and he's running right towards that thing. And the parents don't seem to know what's going on. And I didn't know what to say. I was like, he's going to tackle the vase. This is going to be devastating. And right at the last second, the dad reaches out and grabs the nanny and says, "Tell my son not to touch that. Tell my son not to touch that." And in that moment, it just ripped my heart apart because I knew that kid had a better relationship with the nanny than he did his own father. In fact, the father had a better relationship with the nanny than he did his own son. His knee-jerk reaction in this moment was not to talk to his own son, but to talk to the nanny so that she could talk to his son. And I just vowed at that moment that I never wanted my family to be that way, that I wanted to have a close relationship with my kids. So that was my first summer. That was the first experience with the contractor and kind of seeing he had this great wealth, but his family wasn't the family that I aspired to have
Yeah.
from an outside perspective, right? I mean, I only know what I saw.
That's pretty profound that he couldn't even get the parenting skills up to take care of his son. So
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah. I just, my reaction is always to be with my kids. I'll take any opportunity to talk with my kids and to hug them, to talk to them, to be with them, and to see like in that moment of terror, of fear, that wasn't even a reaction for him. Just doesn't seem like his kid was a priority again, from my perspective. And that hurt. That hurt a lot. So fast forward to the next summer, I'm working with the architect again, huge house, working on his second house, and just super wealthy. But over the summer, I started to notice that his relationship with his family was very different. Interestingly enough, they had a lot of the same things. Like both parents worked outside the home, in both situations. So it wasn't the fact that they had a nanny that was the big, that's not a sin. Okay.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with having a nanny. But they just seemed way closer. And as I started to talk to him, I started to realize that the biggest difference wasn't what he was doing, but why he was doing it. So here's an example. They ate out a ton. They were always going out to restaurants. And he's a pretty frugal guy, as a lot of wealthy people are, right? One of the traits of millionaires is often frugality. And so I was like, dude, I got to ask you, man, why you spend so much money at restaurants? Like, he had 5 kids, big family. Like, it wasn't cheap to go out to restaurants. And he said, here's why. No one in my family likes to cook. We're all terrible at it. It's not enjoyable for us. It's a chore. If we cook dinner, one of us cooks dinner, we're going to have a mediocre meal. We're going to eat it, and 15 minutes later, everyone's going back to their rooms. If I go out to a restaurant, I'm guaranteed an hour with my kids, because it is socially unacceptable for them to get up and go sit at a different table. They're stuck.
Yeah.
And he's like, I will pay for that every day of the week. No questions asked.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Super cool. And it helped me to realize it's not about what he was doing, but the why behind it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying with the why. I mean, two people, someone could be doing the exact same thing, taking their family to dinner every single night, but it's just the meaning behind it could be completely different, a different result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I started writing when I was a kid a list of things I wanted to do when I was rich. I always knew I was going to be rich, right? So I was like, when I'm wealthy, here's what I'm going to do. And a lot of the things are pretty ridiculous, but I might do them still, like have a mahogany wood slide in my house, or have a waterfall in my house with a secret door behind it, right? Nice. Some of these things were,
Beautiful.
your 9-year-old kid, my imagination can think of, right? But one of the things I had on that list was I would never hire a driver. Like, I'm always going to drive myself. I felt like hiring a driver was just so pompous, so egotistical.
Yeah.
And then I had a conversation with the CFO of American Express.
Wow.
One of the biggest corporations in the world. And as the CFO of a financial institution, his job is pretty heavy in that role. And he talked to me about why he had a driver, why he actually had a helicopter, not even just a driver, he had a helicopter. And he said, it is an hour for me to get to work and back every day. So 2 hours a day. And he said, if I can spend those 2 hours working instead of driving, that means that's 2 less hours I spend at the office and 2 more hours I get to spend with my family. I will pay that driver incredibly well, because that is 100% worth my time. And again, it just opened my eyes. The problem wasn't having a driver. That doesn't make you egotistical. The problem was the motivation behind it. Why are you doing this? There could be a very real and valuable reason to do that.
Yeah.
And if you have those good intentions, then you can start to build, a really solid relationship with your family and still, succeed professionally.
Well, those two people, they kept their eye on the prize the whole time, right? So they were probably doing a lot of the same activities, but their focus was different, right? I think that's a big indicator to point out. So,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You can have whatever you want. I truly believe that, right? If you really want to be a billionaire, a multimillionaire, whatever it is, like you can do that. The question is can you survive the journey there, right? And not even survive, can you thrive along the journey, right? So I think about it from like a rocket ship perspective, right? So think about let's take Elon Musk getting to Mars, right? If I want to get from here to Mars in a spaceship, it's going to take like 4 years or something like that. But the end result is going to be amazing. The problem is, though, I have to be able to live those 4 years in a way that's comfortable until I get there.
right.
And most people just put so much money on my life's going to be great when I get to Mars that by the time they get there, their kids don't want anything to do with them. You need to make sure that that journey along the way is fantastic as well. And you can do it. It just takes a lot of diligence, takes a lot of intentionality. But if you can say, I'm going to Mars and I'm going to enjoy the journey along the way, then you get a whole different experience.
And that's one of your core competencies that you coach, right? Is the work-life balance, basically focusing on every step throughout the journey versus just the finish line, right? And
Yeah.
so when someone comes to you and they have a work-life balance problem, what are some of the first things you start on with them?
Yeah. First thing we do is stake your claim, right? So early on in the American history, the westward expansion, you could, according to the U.S. government, just walk out and throw a stake in the ground and say, this is now my land. Now, there's a whole lot of issues with that
Right.
because it didn't belong to us in the first place. But beside that fact, it's so interesting that you just walked up and said, this is mine. I want this. It's mine.
Manifest destiny.
Exactly. We can do the same thing in our lives. And so with my coaching clients, we always start with like, let's just find a couple of minutes a day where you're saying, this is family time. Don't talk to me. So with small business owners, and I get it because I've been there and I am there in a lot of ways. You feel like you always need to be available. If this person has a question, what if this call is a potential client?
Yeah.
I need to close this deal. And so they're always on their phone. They're always in meetings or working or all these things. It's just everywhere. And that's totally understandable. So we just start small. And typically I like to focus around dinner time, but we'll say, hey, just for the first 15 minutes of dinner, doesn't have to be the whole meal. I want you to turn your phone off. Turn your phone off, put it away. 15 minutes later, you can set a timer if you want. 15 minutes later, you go pick it up. You can turn it back on. And if anything happens, you can address it. Right. So we have them start really small and then they can slowly expand that outward. And some people can go drastic differences. Some people don't want to do that. But I got one client who went from 15 minutes a day. You know, he was working. Well, let me back up. He was working 60 hours a week when he hired me and he had a kid coming. He's like, I want to be there for my kid. What do I do? How do I change this?
Yeah.
And his company is doing just as well, if not better than ever before, and no longer working 60 hours a week. He's working 10 hours a week. And he just scrunched it down. So he went from he had that window of 2 hours a day. He started with 2 where he wasn't taking any phone calls. So that's the only time he does take phone calls now. And just totally flipped his whole business around. And that's super fun because now he's so much more available to his kid, to his wife, to his church community, all these sort of things. He's able to do a lot more good in the world because he's freed himself up.
Well, and he did it through scaling, it sounds like, which is kind of the other thing you hit on. And I'm seeing now how they tie hand in hand, right? Because as you force yourself to put more priority on the important things, the time that you do have left over, it's that much more important and mission critical to see that it's your highest ROI time that you spend on stuff. So yeah. I'm seeing that as you're talking, I'm seeing the correlation how it comes about,
Yeah, that was Sorry.
Go ahead.
It also reminds me, I'm reading the book called The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. Have you read it? Anyways, so I'm in the first chapter. That's what they talk about is time management, how to organize your time. And, he gives an example of the got a minute manager. And he's like, I'm 12 hours a day with, hey, got a minute.
I have read that book, actually.
I'm doing these 10-minute meetings all day. And then he's got to go home to do his portion. Like he's just helping people put out fires all day. And then he has, he goes home and does his creative thing, at night. And he calls it pig-headed discipline, where you have to, he sent a memo out to everyone and was like, okay, you want to have a meeting with me? Like we're doing once a week. He like broke everything down into impact corners. Like, these are the impact corners of the business and each person's over that. And then we can have an hour of that meeting and we'll get that taken care of. And he's like, I'm going to set apart a couple hours for God a minutes. And if you want to do that, come at that time. And he just said he was able to take, 16 hours down to 9 or 10, which I'm just saying that to reinforce what you're saying.
I love that.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. The got a minute is, man, that eats up the majority of a business owner's time. I was meeting with a business owner a couple weeks ago, and fantastic business, doing super well. But I mean, we had a 30-minute meeting and he got interrupted 10 times probably. Just like, hey, do you got a sec? Just real quick, what do I do here in this situation? And at the end of the meeting, I just stopped him. I was like, dude, how often does this happen? He's like, oh, this is all day. This is just what I do. And you don't get anything done. And then, like you said, Kalen, then you got to go home and you got to do it at home. Then you're sitting at home doing it because you didn't have time to do it at the office. Right. So one of the things I do with my clients, there's kind of two techniques that I use against this, the got a minutes. Well, there's three really. The first one is what was just mentioned in that book, and that's you schedule time for that specific person. And then just say, hey, if it can't wait, then you can come to me. But if not, we've got that meeting at 11 o'clock on Thursday or whatever. The second way to do it, and these typically go hand in hand with setting a specific time, is if they come in, just say, hey, I'm in the middle of something, because you are. Come back in 15 minutes. 9 times out of 10, that person won't come back. And the reason is because they're looking for the path of least resistance to get their answer. Right. And in that moment, the path of least resistance has been and always has been going to the boss and asking him. But as soon as that path gets blocked off, they're sitting there like, well, I don't want to sit around for 15 minutes. They'll go figure out the answer for themselves. Very rarely will someone come back after that 15 minutes with the same question.
I've seen that in real life too.
Well, I felt that in real life. Like I felt that in myself. Like you got this question and I've been tempted. I'm like, I could just go ask the boss and I could get this answer right away, or I could go the long way around and I can try to get this figured out. But the thing is, as an employee, if you go figure that out, you just become so much more valuable. Plus, you learn it way better. Yeah. If I'm always asking the boss, then it's like you're always going to be asking the boss. You're never going to learn on your own, because it's like you said, that's actually a really good strategy. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, I've used it myself. When I was in that executive position, I had people come into my office just all day long, and I just had to start doing that, and it was really, really effective. And then the kind of third step of that is when they come into your office, if they come back after the 15 minutes and they're like, hey, I came back after 15 minutes, I've got this question, then you immediately just flip it back onto them. And you want to do it with tact. You want to make sure that they know that they're heard. Yeah. And you kind of listen to them, acknowledge them, validate them, and then you flip it back onto them and say, what do you think we should do? And then you can kind of champion them a little bit too and say, look, Derek, I put you in this position because I trust you. What do you think we should do in this situation? And if he says something just totally outrageous, then you can coach him through it. But most of the time, he's going to come up with a pretty good solution, and you work through that. And if he has nothing, if he's just totally blanking on it, or it's a very specific thing that, a code in some book, you can approach it a little bit differently. But for the most part, it's just, what do you think we should do? And coaching them through that. And again, you're then training them to be self-sufficient and to not need those got-a-minute meetings.
Exactly. And it goes back. I see this in my business all the time. And yeah, a lot of times, like, I'm happy to be available. So because I don't want them to waste time. If I can solve it quick and it's going to take them all day, I'd rather they come to me. But
Sure.
a lot of times, like, if I'm in a meeting, I won't take the call. Then I'll call them back to like, yeah, I figured it out, just like you're saying.
Yeah.
But it also goes back to we before we went live, Jake, you were saying how in the trades, a lot of tradespeople, and it can be any business really, they want to say, I am the best at this, so that they're going to be the ones doing everything. And it reminds me of just like being a missionary, when you know how to teach the lessons better and you don't want your junior companion to hop in. And we call it mowing the lawn, right? You have to let your son screw up the lawn a couple times before they're going to start doing a good job. And if you're too prideful as the dad to let your son screw up the lawn, well, you're going to have to be mowing the lawn your whole life, right? And so
Yeah.
it applies to everything. And I think that's a big thing that you teach, that people can come to you for coaching and get some big results.
Yeah. I love focusing on that because, yeah, as a small business owner, especially in the trades industry, typically what happens is you become really good at drywall and you're seeing the prices and you're like, you know what? I should just do this myself. I should have my own company.
Yeah.
Then you go start your company, but you don't know how to run a company. You just know how to do drywall really well. And so then you spend most of your time working in the business instead of on the business. And then you are the bottleneck for the business. It can't grow beyond you because you're only one person. And so then you got to get some other people in there to to make mistakes, and you got to let them make mistakes. And that's the hardest part of being a business owner, is letting someone else make mistakes on your dollar. But it's the only way to grow.
Because it will happen.
Well, and it's on your dollar.
Yeah.
And depending on the skill, the trade, that's what's hard with these. And I'm glad you're talking about this. I want to know the answer, because I feel like there really isn't one when it's a skilled trade and you put your name on the company, which a lot of them do, like Webster's Countertops or whatever it may be, and that person's trusting you, and you're putting your stamp on it, but it's like you don't want someone to go mess it up. And plus, some of those skilled trades could cost thousands and thousands of dollars if you have someone mess it up. And that's the other thing that gets, so there's like the customer like satisfaction side, and then there's just the cost. Like sometimes that short term or timing, like if you're super overwhelmed, like, okay, we're there's just a whole bunch of them. I mean, I would like to hear what you have to say about that.
You go first, Jake. I want to hear your answer first.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you have to let people struggle. I think about my plumber, guy named Mike, Admiral Plumbing. For those of you who are out there, he's a great guy. He was working on an apartment, and he wasn't able to be there for the day, so he sent one of his newer employees and said, "Hey, you're in charge of this project. Report back to me." And his manager, his new employee, went out there and he was working on my property, and he stepped through my roof. Like he was working on the floor above. He stepped in between the joists, put a hole in my kitchen ceiling. Right. And the way Mike handled it was so awesome. I don't know what the conversation was off site, but at least there it was like, hey, we make mistakes. That's cool. We'll pay for it to get fixed, obviously. And we're super sorry this happened. And it was totally not a big deal. That's how you learn.
Sounds
right?
like you're a cool customer too. Side note.
True.
Yeah,
true.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that definitely affects it. But you just got to realize that's how you pay for training. That's a big part of training, right? A lot of people want to hire, a training company to come in and train your company. And that is important. I mean, that's part of what I do for a living. But before that, or at least in tandem with that, is you have to be willing to pay for the mistakes of people, because that's really where that's where the real learning happens. So anyways, let me kind of circle back to your question there. How do people in the trades do it? You got to start teaching people as soon as you can. And you got to start giving up what you can give up, right? So I'm spacing on his name right now. There was this painter in the 1800s who was known for painting royalty. and you feel like you can't scale that business because it's a painter, right? He's
Right.
the guy in charge. He's the guy with the
He's
skill.
literally an artist.
Right.
No two art pieces are the same.
Right.
Yeah.
No one can
So
put his signature on it.
exactly. Well, what he ended up realizing is that he realized where his skill set was and what people were really paying for was for him to paint their faces. The rest of the painting, 95% of the painting, could be done by anybody. And so what he did is he created some systems and kind of trained his people to paint everything else like him. But then he spent just, working on that 5% of the painting, he painted the faces. And that allowed him to, quadruple his output or more, because then he could just focus on what he's doing best and everyone else gets trained on doing the rest. Right. So to me, that's a great example of how to approach it from a trades perspective. Is it start there. And then once they get really good at doing the 95%, then you can start training them up on how to paint faces as well. And you can start outsourcing that as well to some of your employees.
Yeah, that's a good. I didn't see that coming. Actually, I haven't heard that before. I had a conversation with someone who owns a pool cleaning company, and they're starting break it down, maybe 5, 6 a.m. They're getting done at 9 p.m. They have tons of houses, but they just can't, or maybe it's not willing. I don't know. They just can't bring anyone else on. And one of the comments that was made was just like, these people trust me. Like, I have such a good relationship. Like, some of these people ask me to take their trash out for them, like put it on the curb. Like, he's like, I have such a good, strong relationship with these people. He couldn't in his heart send someone else to go clean those pools. But now look at his life. I mean, he probably has Sundays off, Monday through Saturday, just all those hours, just can't even breathe. To keep that income. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, if you ever take a vacation, right? If he ever takes a vacation, he loses that income and his customers are going to be upset, right? He's trapped in his business.
Right.
Most people get into business for two reasons. They want more freedom or they want better finances, right? They want a big payout, the big money that comes from business ownership. And typically, most business owners are going to lose both of those almost immediately after starting their business and will never get it back. It's funny and it's super depressing at the same time. You realize how many business owners are trapped in their own business. And this pool guy seems like he's right there. So you bring up a good point. You got to figure out what it is that your customers want most, right? Some people call it their unique value proposition. Mike McAllowitz in a phenomenal book I highly recommend called Clockwork. He calls it the queen bee role, right? The queen bee's main role is producing eggs, and that's what the company does, right? That's the main focus. And if your biggest thing that your customers love is that they trust you, that you take out their trash can for you, that you do these little things, then you build that into your training with your guys. And maybe you bring them with you for 2 or 3 weeks or a month. It's like, hey, at this house, we always take out the trash. At this house, we always bring in the newspaper. Whatever it is, you figure out what your customer loves and you train other people how to do it. And they are still going to be attached to you, your company, and not just you. So it's figuring out what it is that they really like, what they love most about you as a company, and then building that into your training so other people can be like you in those situations.
And if you really believe, like we were talking about at the beginning of the show, that you can do good, you can really give back to people by being a business owner, you're going to force yourself to do that. And it comes back to, we talked about the cost of this, and you have to prioritize something over money for a short amount of time, so that you basically give up a little bit of money for a good amount of freedom and more money in the future, if that makes sense.
Well, I think, Ben, you've been a good example with that in your businesses, because that was my other thought is, and I want to hear both your thoughts on this, because this is the other dilemma that comes into this. Not just that you're the face and that you have that relationship with that customer and you don't want to lose that that client, or you don't want to lose that account because you're not showing up anymore. The other side is you want to, in order to get someone who is just as good as you, who's probably just that top tier person, the cost, like you can't get that for cheap, right? So I think it's okay. Well, I want to hire someone for $10, $15 an hour that's going to be just as awesome as me. But like those people, why would they work for that? Like if they're that good at what they do, why wouldn't they just start their own and build up their own clientele with? So there's the cost. Like, what approach do you advise on that? And I think you may have answered a little bit of that, Ben, because maybe some of those business owners who are literally lost all their freedom, making great money, but they can't come to themselves. They can't like grip the fact that I got to pay someone. I'm going to lose a little bit of my overall, net monies if I bring someone else on. So I don't know, like if it's both that's going through their head, like, okay, I don't want to lose my pie to get smaller, or I can't, and then in that same thought, it's like, I can't afford the top tier employee because if I do, it's going to cut this and blah, blah, blah. So I just want to hear your guys' thoughts around that.
Yeah, I've got a couple thoughts, but you want to go first, Ben?
No, you go first, Jake.
All right. I got a lot of thoughts on this. This is a fun topic for me.
And I hope you can add, I mean, this is like the big dilemma of all these guys, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is why Jake gets paid the big bucks. So teach everybody this. Seriously.
Yeah. There's a couple things. I think the first thing you have to realize is that you will never get an employee as good as you. And what I mean by that is that you're not going to find someone as dedicated to this business who's going to work the kind of hours without complaint that you are willing to work. It just won't happen. And that's okay. You don't need it to have it. You will find people who are better in other areas, have different skill sets than you, and you need to find those people. And even people to kind of replace you in certain areas like we're talking about now. But you just need to understand it's not going to be another you, because if it was, they'd go start their own business. And you don't want another you in the business because you already got you. You need somebody else. So
good point.
That's the first thing you got to remember. Don't expect to hire someone who's just like you or who's just as dedicated to you, because they're not going to be. And that's okay. They're employees and they're content being employees. And we need those. Without employees, none of us have jobs. So we definitely need the employees there. That's the first thing. And the second thing is you want to start hiring at the lowest level possible as opposed to the highest level. And I don't mean that quality wise. I mean that skill set wise. So you want to basically start hiring at the bottom of your organization chart and let those people work up. And you want to find the highest quality individual you can to start, sweeping the pools while you're doing the chlorine or whatever, right? You get them to take on, to use that painting analogy, you get them to paint the backgrounds or to paint the dresses, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You get them to do some of the simpler stuff. And as they get more competent in that and you build a trust with them, then you give them more and you give them more and they work their way up through the company.
Right.
A big mistake we make as business owners is like, hey, I need to replace myself. So I'm going to find someone who does everything that I do, and you can't afford them. You literally cannot afford them, at least someone of quality. So you end up hiring someone worse than you, worse than the quality you want, and your businesses suffer. So you kind of got to think backwards, and you start at the bottom, filling out those, getting things off your plate any way you can, and then you start working towards the higher positions.
That's solid. And I know that, I mean, I've tried to put that in practice. It kind of comes naturally. We got something a little unique with our real estate investing company where I'm trying to start at the top and then we'll work our way down. But in the moving company, it's been that way. And to the point where now literally everything from the top down, we try to delegate out. And I have a real world example with my wife's company. She has a protein cookie bakery. And
cool.
So we just had this conversation. It's fresh in my mind just from yesterday. And I think it's amazing because she just had a baby and we're going through the steps of, okay, how are we going to delegate all these jobs out? And I'm like, okay, we got to do a training manual. and we got to be okay with it not being perfect, right? We got to be okay if it's not exactly how you do it. We got to be good with that, knowing that it's going to open you up to take care of our daughter, right? So it's just goes back to everything you're teaching. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, there's got to be a time and a place for, like AJ Osborne calls it a 200% employee, right?
Yeah.
Where, and I recently learned it was at the storage conference. I went to a storage conference. They were talking about the new technology that's going to come into self-storage, which is going to be some less management, more automation, where, you know, a customer can have that whole experience without talking to someone. I can go on my phone, I can sign the lease, I can get my digital key, I can go show up. I don't really need, you know, a manager in place. And the strategy that a lot of these business owners were talking about is, you know, if they're automating these facilities, we would rather get a $100,000 a year employee to cover these 3 facilities than having to pay, you know, $50,000 each on all of them. And, you know, so
Yeah.
I mean, I think in the trades, maybe it is unique, with the fact that there's different skill sets from low to high that you can build. But yeah, anyways.
Well, you kind of have to build it into your pricing too, right? And
Yeah.
you have to be okay. You know, it's very costly because you have to be able, if you're running a countertop shop, you have to be willing to pay. Not only do you have to pay more than any other countertop shop, but you have to pay in a good enough salary that they don't want to go start their own business, or that they feel secure enough. And then you have to be okay with the cost of learning, right? The cost of a fixer upper every once in a while, if the countertop's not aligned right, you got to be okay with the cost of sending them back to do more. So it's costly, but it's what it takes to go big long term.
Yeah. It's an investment. It definitely is. And you got to figure out really if you have to be thinking long term as a business owner. If you're just thinking short term, yeah, it doesn't make sense. You know, going back to that automation thing with the storage units, it might make sense to pay $100,000 versus, you know, 150, but after 3 years, that thing is more than paid for itself, right? So you got to think long term and figure out what's the best thing long term and how can I afford it. And a big thing is building in pricing accordingly. So typically when we're a solopreneur, we start pricing thing as a solopreneur without the overhead, and that doesn't allow us to grow. So we need to be pricing it as if we had the overhead so that we can build the savings and build up that overhead to then take it to the next level, hire the next employee. So typically one of the first things I do with my clients is let's charge more.
Yeah.
And for most of us, especially in the trade industry, the trades industries, charging more isn't a bad thing. It's going to make you stand out as a high-end client, as a high-end service, which is what most people want. Most people want quality over cheap.
Well, you weed out bad clients fast, right? So like on the moving side, right? People call looking for a deal. They're going to be giving you a hard time the whole entire time you're moving them.
Oh yeah.
And same thing with storage units. If you're the lowest price storage unit in town, you're going to have the shadiest people at your facility. You're going to have
a bunch of bodies in your facility.
Exactly. A bunch of drugs, blue meth. And you're going to have a bunch of delinquencies, right? You're going to be chasing people down. But if your storage facility is priced a little higher, then you don't ever have to chase down rent, because people that are going to not make their payment are going to be signing up at a different facility that's less secure and less quality. So you get what you pay for, and you also get the kind of customers you price yourself for. So if you're pricing yourself, you're literally saying, I'm only going to take this quality of customer. And it's kind of counterintuitive, but it's true. So that's good advice, Jake.
It'll make you more money. It will save you so much time. And, Tim Ferriss talks a lot about this in his book, 4 Hour Work Week, of Pareto's Law, which is this idea of this 80-20 principle, where 20% of your customers make 80% of your revenue, and the bottom 20% of your customers, the ones that are making the least amount of money, typically take 80% of your time.
Yeah.
And so you just got to figure out who is a good client for you and focus on finding more of those. And you have to be okay saying no to clients. And that's tough,
Easier
especially
said than
early
done.
on. Yeah.
Especially when you're hitting the pavement, just doing any bending over backwards for a client. And then you have to, you get going enough to you have to switch your mindset to say, hey, I got to have some self-respect. And it also helps the client in the long run too, because the right expectation set where you're happy doing the job the right way for them. So that's good advice.
Yeah, it's the question I kind of pose is, if you freed up 80% of your schedule, how many more of those top tier clients could you bring on? And most people are like, oh, I could double that 20% at the top. I could double those. Well, that's going to make you way more money than spending that time on the bottom tier. So get rid of them as soon as you can, because that time is more valuable in finding those other clients.
I'm fired up. That's deep doctrine. That's awesome, man. Thank you.
Yeah. It's fun stuff, man. I could talk about this stuff literally for days. It's my favorite topic in the world. It's super fun.
Yeah, I thought it was cool before we started recording. You were talking about how happy you've been doing coaching, and you get really excited. You feel really passionate about it, and it just seems like you really, it's just kind of like the path that you wanted to be on. And I don't know if you've want to talk about that, or maybe it might be finishing the story you started. With those two that you saw, you had that contrast, and then we talked about the 10 years and and the exec position, and then you made your way into coaching. Maybe you could tie the knot on that story for us.
Yeah. So after I started, as soon as I got into an executive position, I hired an executive coach almost immediately, and that was super helpful for me. I felt like I grew so much through that. So shortly thereafter, I don't know, maybe after a year in that position, I started taking an online course, a super extensive year-long course on coaching, on how to be an executive coach.
Yeah.
And originally I was thinking, I'm just going to use this internally on my own, at the company I was at. I'm going to help coach my employees, which I definitely recommend that people do that.
Yeah.
I felt like I was a way more effective manager after taking a coaching course. But then I was like, man, I love doing this. This is way fun. I want to try it on the side. So I set aside 3 hours a day. I would coach from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. So I'd get up at just at the crack of dawn, 5 to 8, I'd coach. And then at 8 to 5, I'd coach. I'd do my day-to-day job, my day job. And after doing that for 2 weeks, I just knew that was what I was going to be doing. I said, I love doing this. This is my passion. This is where I want to spend my time. And I quit literally the next day. I walked in and they were so they were so great, the company I was working for, because I was an executive. It affects the company when you lose an executive. But I was like, I got to be honest with you, I feel like I need to leave right now. And a big part of that for me was spiritual. I felt a big push from Heavenly Father, from God, saying, you need to leave today. Which is very, very strong and terrifying. Because I've been coaching for 2 weeks. We didn't have enough clients to live off of, and not to mention we had 4.5 babies at the time. We were still paying off the last baby and had another one coming. And it was stressful. Don't get me wrong, it was super stressful.
That's a lot on the line. But I love it. I love the risk.
Yeah,
that's huge.
And I love the faith in yourself and in God to be able to do that with 4.5 kids. Good job, Jake.
How'd you get that? It was just a feeling. Maybe you could describe a little bit more what that felt like. And then when did you know? And then did you have pushback after? And what did that feel like?
Yeah. So over these 2 weeks that I was coaching, I was like, man, this is this is really fun. I really like this. And um, there were some, we were hiring another executive at the company, and there were some hiccups with that and a little bit of, I don't want to say drama, but I guess confusion as roles. And so we had these big long meetings at work going over these roles and stuff like that. And I got on the call with this new executive one night after this is at the end of the 2 weeks. We go through everything. We resolve all the issues. We solve all the problems. Everything's great. Like, I feel so good. I was like, yes, we did it. We made it through this rough patch of realigning leadership positions. And I go home, and that's when it hit me. It was right after I fixed this big problem at work. I was like, okay, I now work is going to be even more fun. And it hit me like, you need to leave. And so I went home, and I was laying on the floor here in my office, staring at the ceiling, just stressing out of my mind.
Oh, geez.
I know the feeling.
Right. That's where that pushback came from. Right. I got the prompting. I got the feeling of, for me, it was just a thought coupled with, it's, to me, it's,
Well, the fun,
I feel
right?
an adrenaline rush, right? My heart rate accelerates. It's very similar to an adrenaline rush that I get in another situation, but it's a little different for me. And that's how I recognize God speaking to me. But then it left, right? And then I'm just laying on the floor, staring at the ceiling like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? We haven't finished paying for the last baby. We got another baby coming. We got house payments, right? I know how to coach. I knew small businesses really well. I knew I could coach people really well. I'd been doing it successfully internally, and then charging people for the last 2 weeks. And that had been going really well, even those early stages. So I was confident I could be a good coach, but I had no idea how to run a coaching business. And I was just scared. And my wife comes and sits down next to me on the floor. And she says to me, we've trusted God this far in our life. Why not trust him again? And I just love that woman. She's so wonderful. So much faith.
Sounds amazing.
And that's when I said, okay, let's do it. And I resolved at that moment. The next morning, I called the CEO and everyone else on the executive team. I spent the whole day quitting because I called every single person in the company who was going to be affected directly by me leaving, and let them know I was leaving. And it was a long day, but it was that moment sitting next to my wife. And she said, we've trusted God this far. Why not trust him again?
Wow. That's incredibly impactful. And I think I might be going out on a limb here, but I think it's very timely too. I don't think you knew this, Jake, but Callan's actually going through the same thing right now. And so I
did not.
I want to thank you for sharing that, because I didn't tell you that before the show, but it's pretty special that you'd have such a parallel at this current time for Callan too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's to me one of the biggest miracles in life is the really how much God looks over us.
Yeah.
When I quit that job, I had 3 months savings, and I was like, we'll just scramble. And we've been doing this for 2 years and we haven't run out of money yet, right? It's like we never even tapped in, we've tapped into the savings a little bit, but we still have a little bit left. And like, it's crazy to me. I don't even know. I'm a pretty smart dude, but mathematically, it doesn't make a lot of sense how it's worked. I just know that God has had his hand in it. And so that he's there with us. He's helping us out. He wants more business owners out there. I firmly believe that, so that we can do more good in the world and make the most of the opportunities that we have. And the other thing is that the risk isn't that great if you think about it. Like, even when I'm laying on the floor, just having a little panic attack, staring at the ceiling, worst case scenario is I have to go move in with my parents in their basement or something. Like, and granted, that would be really hard with the family we have, but it's not life and death.
Yeah.
It's not as dramatic as we think it is. And yeah, maybe you lose everything you have. Okay, start over. You started from scratch, from zero before. You can do it again.
The adventure of life, right?
Yeah.
Life was meant to be a little dangerous and a little exciting. Obviously not stupid risk, but calculated, smart
Yeah.
risk. That's what we're here for, is to stretch ourselves. So I love that.
Yeah, dude, it reminds me of this movie. Dude, this is an old movie um, called The Fastest Indian, I think is what it's called. Um,
Soon to be
it's about
canceled.
it's about this guy who rides motorcycles, and
Okay.
Indian is the name of the motorcycle company. Um, and this person comes up to him and says, "What if you die on this motorcycle?" And he said, "I live more on this motorcycle in 15 seconds than other people will live in their entire life." And that just hit me so hard because that's the way I feel about a business owner. Like, what if you fail?
Yeah.
It's like, well, I live more in the adventure than most people get the opportunity to do in their whole life, and so it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate what you've said. I mean, again, we're not advocating for people to quit their jobs necessarily. Like
Sure.
employees are really
Don't
important.
hold us accountable.
but
Make your own decisions.
but the
Get your own
point
revelation.
is, I mean, the point is, like for me, like Ben mentioned, I'm in this transition right now, and I had to converse. I've been talking to my boss, and I work in an amazing company. I work with some of the best, brightest. Landon Monk's he's one of the best CFOs in the West Coast. It's been like a privilege and an honor to be able to work with him and to be involved in the business. They take really good care of me there, and so like they take really good care of me over there. But it's what it comes down to for me is kind of like just this prompting, but more. It's kind of like that passion, sometimes in life, that's what I've been feeling. It's like, I just feel like there's more out there, and there's more that I need to do and more that I want to do. And when I've been weighing this decision on whether I should stay or not, what it boils down to is just, what do I feel like I'm going to be the happiest doing? That's what it came down to, because, I'll make money either way. I'll have a balanced life either way, but it just came down to what I feel like I'm going to have the most joy, the most fun, and that I'm going to enjoy doing every single day, and I'm going to be excited about doing, because I'm excited about this new venture that Ben and I are going to go on together. But what was crazy with my experience, that answer is, it was just last weekend over General Conference weekend, and I had this heavy on my mind. I was thinking about it all weekend, because I had long conversations, and I have a really good friendship with the CFO of our company, which I'm in the finance and accounting department, and my uncle from Phoenix, Arizona. We were at the cabin.
Yeah.
We were watching conference at the cabin, and he showed up to the cabin. It was like super surprising. Like we don't ever see him, and I just like, "Hey, JD, how's it going?" And he just like I'm here. He basically scheduled a flight, left at 1 p.m. Saturday, and was flying home 1 p.m. Sunday. It was just like such a weird trip, random trip.
Okay,
just right. Like it almost didn't make sense that he was there, and just like of all the people, like he was just there. And then we had this conversation, and he was telling me that his situation when he was trying to decide between these two schools, he's in education, and he was trying to decide between these two schools, and one of the school he would have to take a pay cut, and he didn't know a lot of information on this other school and stuff, but he just said he felt in his heart, like it was just in his gut. He just felt in his heart that he needed to switch to this other. He needed to go to this other school, even though he was in one of the most prestigious schools in the state. Just felt in his heart and his gut. That's all the information he had. It would be a pay cut. Just felt that he needed to make the switch, and so he did. And he had to walk away, from a good counter offer. And you know, he was just sharing with me how amazing, like he said, I never could have imagined. I couldn't even, there would have been impossible to know, you know, all these things that have happened and lined up that have been so amazing at this new school, and just, you know, financially and emotionally, socially, everything has just been, he couldn't have painted planned it even better. And so that was kind of for me. And he told me, he was just like, you got to follow your heart, you know, you got to, and so that was interesting for me. And that's kind of where I felt like that was my answer, you know?
It's amazing, man.
Yeah. So
and very timely for you to share your journey, Jake. I mean, it's been cool. I've it's been cool to hear from you and kind of see a short part of your career as you've kind of grown into this business coach and this big leader, not only in business, but in the community as well. So I think that's timely, and I'm proud of you too, Callan, for following your gut. It's going to be a fun time, man. Jake, I mean, we are so grateful you came on. I mean, if there's any takeaways you could maybe give for our audience, maybe one thing you kind of hang your hat on that you'd say would apply to anyone, what would you give us as a takeaway today as we wrap it up?
Yeah. The thing that comes to mind has very little to do with business, actually, but I'll go ahead and share it anyways. Oh, I think it actually has a lot to do with business. You got to take yourself. You can't take yourself so seriously. You got to relax, and not take yourself so seriously. Like learn to laugh with others. Learn to laugh at your own mistakes. Learn to relax, and that can be really hard especially in hard times. But the biggest thing, I think the biggest thing that's helped me through, starting a new business with just a slew of babies, and I mean, spending
whole starting five.
Our diaper runs are just outrageously expensive.
I mean, do you even have to you don't even have to look. You just, every single diaper of every single size, you just put in the basket, right?
Just take one of everything. Yep. Just go down the aisle and start loading them in.
Your personal assistant goes to Costco. Hey, will you pick up diapers? They're like, what kind? How many? You're like, just everything that they have there. Just bring it home.
Just take a pallet. Just bring a pallet back. We'll be good.
Sorry.
But it has been super fun. Like I said, the most fun I've had professionally. And at the same time, it's been really hard and really, really stressful at times. And the thing that has gotten me through it more than anything, I think the single most impactful habit I've had is this little goal that I set around prayer. So originally I set a goal just to pray, just set aside time for prayer. But then with my evening prayers, I decided to set aside, and I actually pull out a timer, and I time myself that for the first 5 minutes of my prayer, I don't ask for anything. I only thank Heavenly Father for everything that I have in my life. So I spend 5 minutes at least and sometimes it's very hard, scrambling for things to be grateful for because it feels like the world is ending. And then after that, then I go about my prayer as I normally would and ask for the help that I need and for God to be in the places that I need support. And that 5 minutes of gratitude, I think, has been the biggest impact on my life lately, especially lately. If I can tell you to do anything, I would say make time for gratitude and prayer. And how you do that is up to you. Like the 5 minute thing, like that's not doctrine or anything. That's just what helped me to prioritize it. But whatever works for you, as you find ways to include gratitude, sincere gratitude in your prayers, especially, life's gonna be a lot easier.
It's perfect.
Yeah, Callan, I don't know if you remember this, but just last night we were playing basketball, and you brought up gratitude. You're like, one thing that stands out to me that we need to focus on is gratitude.
Yeah.
And so I think that's amazing. Like, I think, Jake, you're the epitome of what we think of when we think of Beyond Net Worth. You're the poster child. So glad you made the time for us, man. Where can people find you if they, I mean, I would say that there's probably going to be some business owners listening that would benefit from your coaching and want to connect. So how can people find you?
Yeah, I definitely welcome that. I love helping business owners. It's what it's one of the things that excites me most in life. But they can find me a couple places. I'm on all social media. I'm not incredibly active on social media posting, but I'll respond to stuff there. Loveland_Jake is my handle on every platform out there. And then tenaciouslyhuman.com. You can find my contact information there. You can get a hold of me, and it's a great place to start.
That's the podcast. And is that the name of your coaching business as well?
Yeah, it's got the same name.
Okay,
cool. Perfect.
So yeah, Tenaciously Human. It's also the name of the podcast that is on just about every streaming service out there. So
yeah, and I've listened to that. That's a bomb podcast. So if you're trying to hype yourself up, go listen to that one too. That's amazing. So
thanks. It's super fun.
Well, awesome. Thanks, Jake, so much for coming on. We really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you. It's been fun. I've done a lot of podcasts, but this has been super fun. This is one of the most enjoyable ones I've done in a while. So thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, Jake. That's another episode of Beyond Net Worth. See you next time.